All right, I want to talk about something that nobody ever wants to talk about. Not in public, not even in private, and definitely not with any kind of seriousness. But we're going to do it right now because it matters. Lack of sex will actually make a man's penis shrink. And yeah, I know. Some of you just tensed up hearing that. Others laughed. Some rolled their eyes, but a few of you leaned in because deep down you know it's true. Maybe you've felt it. Maybe you've seen the signs and just chalked it up to getting older or being tired or too stressed or not in the mood. But let me tell you something, this is not about a joke. This is about your health, your identity, and your connection to your own body. We spend so much time pretending we're too tough to care or that we're too busy. We don't talk about how disconnected we feel, how out of touch we've become not just with other people, but with ourselves. And the truth is, when you go long enough without sexual activity, your body starts to adapt, not in a good way. You stop using that part of yourself, and your brain goes, well, guess we don't need this anymore. That's literally how your biology works. Neural pathways weaken, blood flow decreases, tissue loses elasticity, the body follows the mind. If your mind is disconnected from your sexual identity and your physical drive, your body starts to shut it down. It starts to go offline. That's how you get erectile dysfunction. That's how you end up in a place where even when you do want to show up sexually, your body won't cooperate. This doesn't mean you're broken. It doesn't mean you're doomed, but it does mean you have to wake up, because this isn't about sex for the sake of sex. It's not about some superficial standard or pressure. This is about your relationship to your own body and to being fully alive. When you stop engaging with your sexual energy, you stop engaging with one of the most powerful forces of vitality that you have. That energy isn't just about pleasure, it's about confidence, it's about boldness. It's about feeling like you matter. And when you push that part of yourself into a dark corner because you're afraid or ashamed or just checked out, you start shrinking in more ways than one. You stop reaching for more. You stop taking chances. You stop feeling fully present. It affects how you walk into a room, how you speak to your partner, how you carry yourself in a meeting. It bleeds into everything. I want to say this as clearly as I can. There is nothing wrong with you for going through a season where you feel low or numb or not interested. That happens, but staying there, refusing to talk about it, pretending it doesn't matter, that's what keeps you stuck. That's what makes things worse. The same way a muscle atrophies when you stop using it, your sexual health will deteriorate if you ignore it. That's not fear, mongering, that's not opinion, that's physiology, and the worst part, you won't even notice it happening at first. It's subtle. It starts with low energy, a drop in confidence, then it's performance anxiety. Then maybe porn becomes a substitute, maybe you stop initiating, maybe you don't even try anymore, and that becomes your new normal, quiet, dull, disconnected, and it sucks the life out of you. You deserve more than that. You were born to feel alive, to feel connected, to feel power and purpose and passion. Not just in your work or your goals, but in your body. You don't need to chase sex like some teenage fantasy. You need to reconnect with yourself, with your desires, with your health. If something's not working, talk to a doctor, talk to a therapist, get blood work done. If you're partnered, talk to them. If you're not, that doesn't matter. What matters is getting back into your body, being present again, being curious again. And yes, that might start with something as simple as being honest about how long it's been since you felt desire. How long it's been since you've let yourself feel good, feel wanted, feel like you're still in the game, and maybe you're sitting there thinking, but I'm older now, things change. Yeah, they do, but that doesn't mean they stop. You don't stop being sexual just because you hit 40 or 50 or 60. You don't lose your right to pleasure or connection or desire just because you've gone a while without it. The moment you decide to reconnect, to move your body, to get your mind in the game, to stop being ashamed, is the moment you start reclaiming everything that's been slipping away, because your body, it wants to work with you. It's ready to respond, but you've got to show up. You've got to meet it halfway. You've got to stop pretending like this doesn't matter. It does. Because when you take care of that part of yourself, the part that's physical and intimate and alive, you start showing up more powerfully everywhere else. You walk taller, you speak with more authority. You smile more, you handle stress better, you lead differently, because you're no longer suppressing something essential to who you are. So no, this isn't just about a shrinking penis, it's about shrinking presence. Shrinking drive, shrinking identity, and you get to flip the script. You get to decide that today is the day you start turning things around. It's not too late. It's never too late to reclaim your connection to yourself. And that doesn't start with shame. It starts with awareness, with honesty, with action. So let's stop pretending this is funny or embarrassing or unimportant. Let's start having real conversations. Let's start showing up in our own lives. Because you deserve to feel alive. You deserve to feel confident. You deserve to feel like yourself again. Use it or lose it isn't just a clever saying. It's a biological truth that applies to almost every part of your body, including your sexual organs. When it comes to male sexual health, consistent activity matters. The penis, like any other muscle, involved organ, thrives on regular stimulation and blood flow. If it's neglected for long periods of time, the body begins to adapt to that inactivity, and not in a way you want. It literally starts downgrading its function. Blood flow is essential for maintaining healthy erectile tissue. Erections aren't just about arousal, they are about circulation. Every erection is an act of vascular health. The penis relies on strong blood flow to keep tissues oxygenated and elastic. When a man experiences regular erections, whether through sex, masturbation, or even spontaneous arousal during sleep, the blood vessels in the penis remain active and flexible. This constant flow of oxygen, rich blood, keeps the tissue healthy and responsive. But when there's a long period without sexual activity, that flow slows down. The less blood that moves through those vessels, the less oxygen gets to the tissue, and over time, the elasticity begins to degrade. Tissue that doesn't get regular use starts to weaken. Think about any muscle in your body. If you break a leg and wear a cast for 8 weeks, what happens to the muscles in that leg? They shrink, they lose strength. They stop functioning the way they used to. The same thing happens to penile tissue. The medical term for this process is disuse atrophy. And yes, it applies to sexual organs. When the body senses that a certain area isn't being used regularly, it stops allocating resources there. It essentially says, this isn't a priority anymore, and begins reducing blood supply, tissue strength, and nerve responsiveness in that area. Over time, this can lead to noticeable physical changes. Some men may experience mild shrinkage of the penis, particularly in length or girth. It won't happen overnight, and it may not be dramatic, but it's real. And for many, it's not even about the visual change, it's about function. Erections become weaker. Spontaneous arousal becomes less frequent. The time needed to achieve an erection increases, and in some cases, the ability to maintain an erection disappears entirely. These issues are often chalked up to aging, but they're not always inevitable. In many cases, they're the direct result of inactivity. Sexual activity doesn't just support physical health. It maintains a feedback loop between the brain and the body. The more you engage sexually, the more the brain remains wired for arousal and response. That mental stimulation matters. When sexual behavior becomes irregular or non-existent, the brain's ability to trigger those responses diminishes, the desire fades, the response time slows, and the mind begins to tune out the body's sexual signals. This psychological disconnection reinforces the physical decline. It becomes a cycle. No activity leads to less function, and less function leads to less motivation to engage. The body forgets how to perform, and the brain forgets how to ask for it. Men often assume that if they're not in a relationship, or if they're too busy, or if they're dealing with stress, it's okay to let their sex life slide. But the consequences of that go far beyond just missing out on pleasure. It affects your hormonal balance, your cardiovascular health, and your sense of vitality. Testosterone levels can drop when sexual activity is absent, especially if that inactivity is paired with poor sleep, poor diet, and chronic stress. And as testosterone drops, libido falls, motivation dwindles, energy tanks. It's all connected. Even men who experience regular nocturnal erections, those unconscious, spontaneous erections that occur during REM sleep, benefit from that blood flow. But as you age or fall out of sync with your body, even those natural functions can slow down. Without any form of regular sexual engagement, those nighttime erections can become less frequent or disappear altogether, accelerating the process of decline. It's like your body is asking, are we still using this? And if the answer is no, the system gradually powers down. This isn't about being sexual just for the sake of it. It's about understanding that your sexual function is a part of your whole health. When you neglect that part of your body, it doesn't just wait around, it adapts. And in this case, adaptation means deterioration. Your body responds to demand. If there's no demand, there's no supply. Use it or lose it isn't a warning, it's biology. Lack of sex reduces blood flow and tissue function, and this is more than just a side effect. It's a direct biological response to inactivity. Blood flow is essential to every organ in the human body, but when it comes to sexual health, especially in men, consistent circulation isn't optional. It's necessary. The penis is a vascular organ, meaning it relies entirely on a steady, healthy blood supply to function correctly. Every erection that occurs is the result of blood vessels relaxing and allowing an influx of blood to fill the erectile tissue. This isn't just about achieving arousal, it's about maintaining the health and integrity of the tissue itself. When there's a lack of sexual activity, that process of circulation slows. The body isn't getting those regular signals to increase blood flow to the area, and as a result, the blood vessels involved in erection begin to lose their efficiency. They stiffen, they become less responsive. The smooth muscle within the penis, which plays a key role in trapping blood and maintaining firmness during an erection, also starts to weaken. This degradation doesn't happen all at once. It's slow, subtle, and often ignored until it becomes a noticeable problem. But once those changes begin, reversing them becomes significantly harder. Penile tissue, specifically the corpora cavernosa, needs regular engorgement with blood to stay elastic and functional. That engorgement is what maintains its ability to expand and contract. Without it, those tissues start to lose their stretch. Think of it like a rubber band that's been sitting in a drawer for months. It might still look fine, but try to stretch it and it cracks. The same principle applies here. Tissues that aren't consistently used lose their resilience. They become more prone to fibrosis, which is a kind of scarring that can stiffen the tissue and restrict normal function. Fibrotic tissue doesn't expand the way healthy tissue does, and this can lead to weaker, shorter, or incomplete erections. Additionally, a drop in blood flow impacts nerve sensitivity. Sexual response isn't just physical, it's also neurological. The nerves that respond to arousal signals, physical stimulation, and orgasm all rely on a healthy environment to function properly. When blood flow is compromised, those nerves may not receive the nutrients and oxygen they need. They may start to misfire, delay response, or simply dull over time. What used to be exciting or pleasurable might now feel flat or distant. That dulling of sensation contributes further to disinterest and avoidance, setting up a reinforcing loop of less activity, less blood flow, and diminished function. Endothelial cells, which line the blood vessels, play a critical role in managing vascular tone and flexibility. These cells are responsive to lifestyle factors, and they react negatively to prolonged inactivity. In the absence of regular blood flow stimulation, these cells begin to deteriorate. That deterioration can lead to plaque buildup, narrowing of vessels, and increased risk of erectile dysfunction. Erectile dysfunction isn't just a symptom of aging or stress. It's often the first sign of compromised vascular health. Because the blood vessels in the penis are smaller and more sensitive than many other areas of the body, They show signs of trouble before a man might experience more serious cardiovascular issues. Hormonal balance is also tightly connected to blood flow. Testosterone, the primary male sex hormone, promotes nitric oxide production in the body, a chemical that helps relax blood vessels and encourages circulation. But when sexual activity is infrequent or absent, testosterone levels can begin to decline. With lower testosterone, nitric oxide production slows, and without enough nitric oxide, the blood vessels can't expand effectively. This results in a compounding effect. Low blood flow leads to lower testosterone, which then leads to even less blood flow, and the cycle continues. Even spontaneous or nocturnal erections serve an essential purpose. They're not just random. They're your body's way of keeping the tissue functional. These nighttime erections provide regular, passive blood flow to the penis while you sleep, maintaining oxygenation and elasticity in the tissue. But when sexual health declines, these nocturnal erections often disappear. They're a barometer for vascular and neurological health, and their absence is a quiet but serious warning sign that blood flow has already been compromised. The psychological effects of diminished blood flow and function can't be overlooked either. When a man begins to notice changes in his ability to perform sexually, it often triggers a cascade of stress, anxiety, and lowered confidence. That stress further restricts blood flow, creating an emotional and physiological cycle that makes recovery even harder. The anticipation of failure can be enough to reduce arousal completely, compounding the issue and feeding back into the original problem of reduced circulation and declining tissue health. Sexual disconnection affects confidence and presence in ways that most men never fully acknowledge and often don't even realize until the effects are already deeply rooted. Sexual energy isn't just about arousal or intimacy. It's tied directly to how a man experiences himself in the world. When there is a consistent and active connection to one's own sexual identity, there is typically a sense of vitality, energy, and assertiveness that shows up in other areas of life. But when that connection fades, when there's prolonged sexual inactivity, suppression of desire, or ongoing dysfunction, it begins to chip away at how a man walks into a room, how he speaks, how he makes decisions, and how he engages with others. Confidence isn't built from nothing. It comes from repeated evidence that you are capable, strong, wanted, and connected to your body. When a man is sexually healthy and engaged, he often carries himself with a certain energy, shoulders back, chest open, eyes steady. It's not arrogance, it's embodiment. He feels grounded, present, capable of expressing himself fully. But when sex disappears from his life, either because of disinterest, performance anxiety, or long-term inactivity, the mind begins to internalize that disconnection. Instead of feeling present in the body, a man begins to operate from his head, second, guessing, avoiding, detaching. That detachment creates a ripple effect. It shows up in the way he relates to others, especially romantic partners. When there is a breakdown in sexual confidence, communication often suffers. Vulnerability becomes difficult. Initiating intimacy feels risky. Rejection feels heavier than it should. And often, instead of talking about these shifts, men retreat. They shut down. They start to avoid situations that might expose their insecurity. This can include avoiding dating, turning away from a long-term partner, or pouring all of their energy into work or distractions. It's a quiet withdrawal, but a powerful one, because with every withdrawal, the disconnection deepens. Presence, the ability to be fully engaged in the moment, is also compromised when sexual identity is repressed or forgotten. A man who isn't tuned into his own body tends to live in a low-grade state of numbness. Things don't feel exciting. Success feels flat. Achievements feel obligatory. There's a fog that settles in, a kind of emotional dullness that robs daily life of vibrancy. And because sexual energy is one of the core life forces that fuels passion, motivation, and emotional charge, suppressing it dims the entire emotional spectrum. It's harder to feel joy, anticipation, or even urgency because everything gets muted. This loss of presence can also show up professionally. Men who feel sexually disconnected often experience subtle shifts in how they lead, how they speak, and how they make decisions. They may become more risk-averse, less expressive, or overly rigid in their routines. This isn't always obvious, but it's often felt. There's a loss of spark, a lack of charisma that others might not be able to explain, but they sense it. The energy just isn't there. And it's not because the man isn't smart or skilled, it's because the internal disconnect is bleeding into his outer world. Sexuality is deeply personal, but it's also deeply tied to identity. A man who no longer sees himself as desirable, or who doesn't feel sexual energy moving through him, starts to shrink into himself. This impacts posture, voice, mood, and responsiveness. It's the opposite of embodiment, it's dissociation. And the longer this goes on, the more disconnected he becomes from his instincts. Even basic decisions become harder because they're not rooted in feeling. They're processed entirely through thought, which is slow, uncertain, and prone to overanalysis. Over time, this creates a pattern of hesitation, which further erodes confidence. Many men are conditioned to ignore their sexual health until it becomes a crisis. They're taught to push through discomfort, avoid emotions, and never talk about performance or desire unless it's in a bragging context. But this silence becomes a trap. It keeps men isolated, and that isolation reinforces the very insecurities that are undermining their confidence. The internal dialogue becomes critical, shame-based, and full of self-doubt. That doubt spreads. It's felt in relationships, friendships, leadership, creativity, and mental health. What begins as a physical disconnection becomes a psychological one, and what should be an addressable issue turns into a lifestyle of avoidance. When presence is lost, time feels slippery, days blur together. Emotions flatten, purpose becomes vague. This is one of the most damaging effects of sexual disconnection. It robs a man of his sense of immediacy and drive, the fuel behind many of life's most meaningful experiences. Passion, desire, closeness, ambition gets quietly turned down. Not because it's gone forever, but because the connection to it has weakened. And when that connection is lost, confidence stops being something you carry and starts being something you pretend to have.